Hello and welcome everyone. I'm Julie Gorecki, an ecological feminist activist, scholar, and writer. Miriam Bahafu and I co-authored the introduction to the second edition and first English translation of the 1974 book, Feminism or Death, by French feminist activist and ecofeminist Françoise. This book will be out with Verso Books in March 2022. I'm the host of today's episode of Climate Crisis, Time for a New Society, a podcast collaboration between the Rosa Luxemburg Foundation and Verso Books. We are here in a very sunny and wonderful Lisbon today at the International Ecosocialist Encounters gathering. It's happening this weekend between the 21st and the 23rd of January 2022. This three-day public meeting is organized by Climaximo, a Portuguese climate justice grassroots group formed in 2014, which has congregated eco-socialists, eco-feminists, peasants, and trade unionists, amongst others, in Lisbon this weekend. Numerous political organizations and activist movements are here organizing to collectively imagine and set in motion an eco-socialist system change as a remedy to climate catastrophe. This episode focuses on how ecofeminism is foundational to such a systems change. Ecofeminism is a feminist theory and activist movement. It argues that the widespread subordination of women is inseparably linked to the devastating exploitation of the natural environment. Françoise argued that an interlinked historical oppression of women and the environment are at the root of both the environmental crisis and women's widespread systemic domination. That the environment, in fact, the environmental crisis itself, is a result of women's exploitation in some way. For de Bonne, the remedy to this crisis is ecofeminism. Feminism or Death being the book in which the term ecofeminism is published for the first time. Into the 1980s and 90s, ecofeminism developed as an activist theory and a vast field with several branches, including spiritual, cultural, and even, liberal ecofeminism. However, here at the International Ecosocialist Encounters gathering, we are interested in expanding on what some have called a socialist ecofeminism. Central authors of socialist ecofeminism include Vandana Shiva, Diller Durick, Maria Mize, Carolyn Merchant, Ariel Saleh, just to name a few. But please, let's not forget that Indigenous, global Southern women, and decolonial feminists and activists have been articulating capitalism's double subordination of gender and the environment since the start of the climate crisis. Lee Merkel, Kim Anderson, Gloria Anzaldúa, Erin Dottie Roy, and Bell Hooks, again, just to name a small handful, have all written on the intersections of gender and ecology. Today, in the face of the climate emergency, ecofeminism is resurging as a theory and a global activist movement. On the front lines of this struggle is the transnational women and feminists for climate justice movement led by Indigenous and global Southern women. And when it comes to thinking about what a working class socialist ecofeminism looks like, we are very pleased to welcome 5 young ecofeminist activists here in Lisbon. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce them right now. So with us today, we have Alice Gato, Inês Telles, Joana Bregolat, Sara, Bourehiyi, and one other organizer of the conference, Andreia Galvao. I'm going to just start by kind of opening up a conversation, getting back to the basics, if that's okay, starting at a really foundational level, with a basic question. So what is an ecofeminist working class politics, which was the name of the seminar that was held, and how does it intersect with, eco-socialism?
First of all, I'm Joana. I'm from the Spanish state, from Barcelona. I'm a member of Anticapitalistas, a political organization there. And I believe that when we are talking about ecofeminism as a working class politics, we are trying to expand the idea that working class politics it's not just for the ones that are on the factories, it's not just for the ones that are talking about feminism, it's to talk about all the labor that it's produced in our society, all the forces that produce and reproduce our lives, and as a way to organize these kinds of work in a place that it's visible, it's valuable, and it's recognized as valuable. And also in the sense that it's ecofeminism it's not just for the ones that are doing the fights or are the ones that are putting their bodies on the field. It's for the 90% of the society that it's not included on the politics of a bourgeois democracies or so on the capitalism form of organization.
So I'm Inês and I'm from Climáximo in Portugal. I guess I could say that when we are talking in the climate justice movement, when we are talking about involving the labor movement in climate justice talks, we're very often talking about climate jobs campaigns and trying to speak with workers in carbon-intensive jobs and with the unions associated with these jobs. And we very often face like a huge wall when we are trying to communicate with them. So this led us to try to think of a different approach to labor, and that's what also that's one of the paths that led us to this idea of an eco-feminist working class, because we thought that it was insufficient not only in an organizational way to be trying to speak just with these kinds of workers, but also in our conception of what we want with these kinds of campaigns. We don't want just the labor that is being done now to change to something that is green and eco-friendly and that can stop climate change. We want the conception of labor also to be changed, and towards that we need to change the conception we have of care work and reproductive work and metabolic work, because that kind of work is what's going to be central in this eco-socialist feminist world that we want to build. So we need to make this shift, and so we have to center on this work that is needed to care for each other, to care for our planet, and to be able to build an opposition to capitalist exploitation and destruction. So that's one of the paths that led us to think about an eco-feminist working class politics.
Wow, thank you for those really clear links between an eco-feminist, working class politics and how it really links to the environment and kind of envisioning a climate just future. Something we haven't really done very much in the eco-feminist movement as much as we probably should. So would anyone want to add a final thought to that?
So I'm Alice, I'm also from Climáximo. And well, Joana and Inês have said wonderful and really clear things. So maybe just to comment on that, I would just like to maybe give a little bit of context of this session inside of the whole thing that we are doing here on these encounters. So on these encounters, we proposed to answer to three main questions that are really hard to answer to. And these questions were who will, so who are going to be the subjects of the eco-socialist revolution, how to, so how are we going to do the eco-socialist revolution, and where to, so where are we going, what is the eco-socialist society going to be like. And each of the sessions that we did on these encounters had to answer to at least one of these questions. And our session was supposed to answer to the questions who will and how to. So answering to this question of who will, that's also why we choose to focus on the eco-feminist working class. Because when we are talking about who will do the eco-socialist revolution, we have to change those revolutionary subjects that are so often associated in our heads with socialism and so on, because the revolutionary subjects of eco-socialism in the 21st century are really diverse from what we thought they were before. So we really need to include everyone that is doing reproductive labor, metabolic labor, and so on. But also, I think that, and then we also talked about statics of how we can organize towards the eco-socialist revolution, and I think we'll talk a little bit more about it further, so I'm not talking it right now. But one of the things that our session wasn't supposed to do, but I think that it did was also give that vision about how is the eco-socialist society going to be. Because the international eco-socialist movement really needs a direction, really needs a theory, and I think that ecofeminism needs to be that theory. Well, eco-socialism needs to be that theory, but it needs to be an eco-feminist eco-socialism. So I think that on our session, while we were talking about how can we change these conceptions of work, we're already talking about how is the society going to be, because of what Inês said. When we are talking about the climate crisis, we are going to face so many emergencies. It was extremely hard to organize this event, but it was definitely easier than living through climate chaos, and it's going to be harder and harder. And for us to face the challenges that climate change brings us, we really need to value care. It's impossible not to. We really need to put life at the center. So I think that this session also gave us a vision of what is the kind of society that we want to. And while we are organizing the eco-socialist revolution, we are already shaping the society.
Thank you so much for that. Before we gonna move on to another question, can someone take a moment to define for the listeners reproductive labor and metabolic labor concisely?
I think we will do it among all of us in a process, so it will be not just one answer. But I think when we are, for me, there's no clear difference between metabolic and reproductive labor. But in a sense, when we used to talk about reproductive labor as a way to say, we were talking about taking care of people as an interdependency kind of work. And talking about metabolic labor, it puts the other part that is eco-dependency on all the works that we do. As a way to say, it's not just the ones that you are taking care, making the food for your kids, having the laundry for all the people that with you, with the people you live, and all that kind of work that it's needed to be recognized, and it's needed to be visible for all the society. Also puts the focus on the people that make sustains agriculture, for instance, and all the works that can make the sustainability of life in our daily basis.
I don't want to explain it because I think you did it wonderfully. I just want to, use this opportunity to just visualize some of the invisible work that happened on the preparation of this session. So we actually had the wonderful help of Stefania Barca and of Blanca from Observatorio de la Danza y Globalización, and also from Ana Isla, which is an ecofeminist from Peru. And we actually did a webinar about ecofeminism as working class politics on the 17th of January. We are going to make it available soon. And Stefania Barca did an amazing explanation of metabolic labor on that webinar, so I really encourage you to see it.
I second that. Stefania Barca's work in general on ecofeminist, ecosocialism is, I think, kind of canonical at this point, like it's central. So for our listeners, if you want to get more into that, that is definitely an author to focus on. All right, let's move on if we can. So you kind of touched on the session that you all organized, which heavily focused on something we've already started talking about, care and reproductive labor as an economy and as a central eco-feminist working class issue. It was divided into critically discussing three strategies and tactics towards eco-feminist, eco-socialist organizing and potential revolution, maybe even. So we had eco-feminist unionism as one topic, care strike as another, and care national system. I was wondering if you could expand on what you led.
During the session, I was involved in the discussion about the ecofeminist unionism, and this came up as something because, we were trying to imagine what ecofeminist unionism could look like. Some people were confused about the notion. For me, it seemed more or less clear what it would be, but I guess it's still a bit a discussion that needs to be made. Since we were thinking about questioning this concept of working class, this traditional concept of working class, and thinking of an eco-feminist working class. And since unionism is like a historical, very, very important tool for labor struggles, it must be important probably with an eco-feminist working class also. But we were questioning ourselves if these unions would be something that would come out from already existing unions, if it would, they would be something that would organize totally anew from roots. If what kinds of demands should they organize around? Because we all agreed that we needed strong demands that would aggregate people and touch in specifically in people in specific contexts and unite us, so that we could then also be united to discuss further what we wanted from this eco-feminist unionism and politics. And so we agreed that this could be something like, for example, the kind of range of care incomes or basic incomes, something related to reduction of working hours, something really specific that wasn't necessarily in itself just an eco-feminist demand, but that could be aggregating and move us further for developing this eco-feminist working class. I would think of more things, but maybe I would pass to my comrades now.
Yeah, listen to Inês. I think that one of the principal things that we have to have in mind when we are talking about ecofeminism is that it's a way of approaching a theory that can be Marxist materialism in our case, but we are just talking not of a specific thing. It's a kind of a way of creating relationships and organizing ourselves and be able to reach power, as a way to say. And it's not just that there's an ecofeminist point of view of an ecofeminism demand that it's really concrete. When we are talking about ecofeminism, as it happens with ecosocialism, we're also talking about house movements, we are talking about tenants movements, we are talking about union trades movement, we are talking about workers movement, we are talking a lot in a broader sense that we are talking about life, about the movements that are defending life in a moment that life is in danger by a system that destroys life. So it's our tactics. We put the name of ecofeminism to be able to recognize that this is our point of view, and that's where we are creating the base for care work, care strikes, women's march, and it's to be adding something that we sometimes miss on the places, and I think it's kind of a clue. And I'm not talking about the tactic I was on the group, but I think when we were saying about I was on the group of national care systems, and I think national care systems were a demand from feminist movement, but also are a demand of ecofeminist movement as a way that it's a thing that makes people it's a transitional demand, as a way to reach other people, as a way to organize ourselves in a different ways inside the system, but also outside the system. And it's a way to create alternative narratives on a system that doesn't acknowledge, doesn't believe that care is work.
Sara from Ecologistas. I just wanted to add, they already explained it very good. I'm just still learning about this eco-socialist, eco-feminist socialist movement, but I think one of the main points for me is questioning the system, is questioning how unions are working right now, which points the unions have, and how they tend to forget a lot of people. And for me, to have this conversation, to sit and think about which jobs we have right now, which kind of jobs we want in the future, how we organize this job, and how they are usually not in the unions. Like they are not. We don't talk about the reproductive labor. We don't think about reproductive as labor. We think like this is care and it's free because it is what it is. So I think it's a very good point to start, just because I think like it's for me the main point to understand the world and who sustain the world and how our relationship with nature and how we can change that and maybe just give an alternative. So once we have the alternative, once we have the ability to imagine, we have the tools to start to working towards it. So for me it was really great. I learned a lot in these encounters and I still wanted to learn more. But I think like this is not only, as the name can make think that only for women, it's for the whole system, it's for everyone. It's just to change the point of view and see like where the work is starting and what we can do to change that.
Hi, I'm Andreia and I'm organizing the Encounters as Bloco de Esquerda. And yeah, what I think it's really interesting when we start talking about ecofeminism, but more broadly about ecosocialism, is this idea that it came up in some conversations that we were having, like during dinners or informal conversations, about creating a new common sense, about the idea of questioning our bullshit jobs or the post-capitalist society that makes us work many hours for jobs that mean nothing, for products that are superficial and mean absolutely nothing and are garbage and that will deteriorate in a very little time. And at the same time we have essential work that is free. So I think that questioning that logic is very interesting and it really subverts the point of view from where we are looking at society and even at the working class, because there is still this homogeneous idea of who the working class is, and it's exactly like Joana was saying, it's the men that are white and that work in the factories in the 19th century, and we know that the working class today looks very differently and has other bonds that are not only the fact that people are workers, but that they are workers and they are women, that they are workers and they are eco-socialists, and that they are women and that they are black women or that they are trans women, and all these things come together. It's interesting, like even when we are talking about ecofeminism, the need that we have to broaden our lens, like even we have, like my university, we can be speaking about feminism and the second wave of feminism and French feminism. At the same time, the people who clean the faculty are black women that arrive at 6 in the morning, and that leave are black women that leave late and that do all the reproductive work. And at the same time, we are talking about invisible labor, like theoretically, but we are not recognizing. And I think that the need to have this conversation is to have a broader and fairer understanding of the world that we live and how we can subvert the relations of oppression that we face. And with this, I also think it's very interesting to think of the role of care in struggle. Like Angela Davis talks about this a lot, but the idea that when we struggle, like freedom is a constant struggle, that when we struggle, we should also try to create places of liberation and emancipation where people are happy, because sometimes struggle is all we have and the world is violence, but through fighting it we can find a common ground. And I think that care is essential to that, to creating a space where we are happy, we are fulfilled, and we are struggling together.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for bringing that intersectionalist approach that was also so prominent within the session, and an ecofeminist working class politic that is focused on not only gender, not only class, but also race and also other marginalized categories, including sexuality. So, and also the point with who's cleaning in the mornings around invisible labor and at night as well, and the importance of that invisibilized labor during COVID, of course, right? When we kind of glorified this essential worker category and started really thanking the essential workers while still kind of sacrificing that them when they were coming in the morning and cleaning the classrooms of the schools when COVID was happening. That was another focus in the session that I thought was really important, that I think we're being really critical and trying to bring visibility to. So thank you for all of those fantastic comments. The last kind of category that you all focused on in the session was care strike. Can we concisely talk about that before we move along?
Maybe before I talk about the care strike, just to talk about like these different tactics, because I was thinking about it right now, is that initially we thought about doing different tactics of ways of organizing the eco-feminist working class, but I think we ended up doing something different. And now I was thinking about the 3 categories that we chose, and we were supposed to have more and we were prepared to have more, but these were the 3 that ended up with. So the eco-feminist unionism, the care strike, and the care national system. And I'm thinking that all of them can also go together. So care strike is a tactic, but ecofeminist unionism is a way of organizing, and care national system is a program, and you can combine all of them. And I think that all of them bring an important aspect to the table. That is, when we were talking about ecofeminist unionism, you need this concept because the current concept of unionism that you have does not encompass all the workers. And well, now we were talking about this, and there is reproductive labor that you are paid for, but there is also labor that is not reproductive and that is not unionizable. And these people still do jobs, and they still need to fight for those jobs. So on the session, we looked at different work categories that people do in our societies, and there are a lot of works that are unionizable and a lot of works that aren't unionizable but are still work, and people that are doing it, and they have no way of fighting for their jobs. So I think that's why we need to think about ecofeminist unionism, is because of how can we encompass those workers that cannot fight for their rights. And I think that's also a way of thinking about the care strike, because usually when you think about strikes in traditional sense, the people that decide when the strike is going to be, traditionally, is the man that works at the factory, while the woman is at home cleaning everything and cooking dinner for when the man comes back from the union's meeting. And then, while the man goes on striking, okay, I'm talking this like in a really traditional sense, but when the man goes on striking, he can go on striking because the woman is at home caring for the children and so on. So I think that the care strike is also a way of encompassing the people that should be striking and could not be striking. But a lot of things that arise during our session that were really interesting is that when you are doing care strike, the people that are being impacted by the care strike are the people that are dependent on care and that have no fault of what's happening, in most of the cases. But I think that, well, this has a lot of contradictions, of course, but it's a new and exciting tactic. And one of the things that we realized while we were talking about the potentiality of the care strike is that if you are able to do, I don't know, a big care strike for a long period of time, the impacts are going to be completely disruptive. Though, like it's like the motto of the feminist strike: if women stops, the world stops. And I think this would be a really interesting thing to see. At the same time, there are a lot of issues that need to be figured out. And one of the things that we are talking about on the session of how to improve the care strike is also creating alternative organizations or ways of organization where people that usually do not do reproductive labor are doing the reproductive labor so that the people that do it can strike. And each time you do a care strike, you get demands that make that more people can come to the next strike because people are less dependent of them, but they are still dependent, but the care is more distributed. So I think that this tactic can also be a way of organizing society and redistributing care work, but we still need to think a lot about it. And I think that one thing that is common about all of these tactics is that, and all of these ways of organizing and all of these programs, is that they are so new. Like, they are recent ideas and they have so much room for improvement and for exciting growth.
There's a saying in Spanish language, it is: queremos trabajar menos, vivir mejor, redistribuir el trabajo y la riqueza. I think that these words are the meaning of what we are saying right now, that is, we want to be able to have lives, not just go to the work and then do our work to be able to in the next day go to work and all that. This cycle that never ends, is a way to say it. We also want that everybody is recognized for their jobs, for their work they are doing in the society, but also we want that it's not just on a gender basis or a race basis or a national basis how it's distributed the work. We wanted to believe that there's other ways to organize our labor, that it's needed in our societies, and we know it's not just based on oppressions, that way of organizing work, and also the idea of if everything can be modified, if everything can be transformed as a way, it's because there's a lot of needs that right now are not being I will have a problem with the language right now are not satisfied, and we need to be them satisfied. We need right now to be able to think that there are people that lives with a lot of necessity covers, about a lot of commodities in their lives, and people that right now they don't have satisfied their needs. And we are fighting for these people to be able to be satisfied their needs, but not just their needs, to be able to have a life.
One commonality between all of you is that, and it's striking, is that you're all youth climate activists, focusing on eco-feminist solutions to the climate crisis. I was wondering, what is the importance of ecofeminism to the youth climate movement? And what is the potential of ecofeminism politicizing and radicalizing some parts of the youth climate movement towards system change?
I have a lot of things to say about the youth climate movement.
Please.
So don't get me started.
This is the space.
No, but I think there needs to be a paradigm shift in the youth climate movement, and we just had today a session about the youth movement that was called Youth Movement Radical and Ecosocialist, and some of the conclusions were in that sense that we were talking about Fridays for Future mainly, but we were talking about our demands, and also Joana, we talked about the idea that when we demand, we don't demand anything, so people give us nothing. So we are demanding climate justice, which means nothing. We are demanding uprooting the system, which also can mean nothing, or intersectionality, which can mean anything and nothing at the same time. And people give us nothing. They say, okay, we declare climate emergency. Okay, we declare climate justice. Okay, we declare that we're intersectional. So I really think that there should be a bigger focus on struggling and on vulnerable communities, and even in modifying the paradigm of thinking about future. Like the main movement is called Fridays for Future, and we are striking and struggling for our present and also for our past, for redistribution, for guaranteeing that what happened is told as what really happened, that we are telling the stories of colonialism, of oppression. So I think in that sense, ecofeminism as ecosocialism is essential to this idea that society needs to rapidly change, but it's possible to have a program that is for everyone, that is fair, that is socialist, but takes the limits of the planet into consideration, and with that looks at the vulnerable communities, and is able to look at the gender division of labor and the gender division of society, and how the movement in itself, when it doesn't take that into consideration, is an instrument to maintain that oppression.
Just one thing that I was thinking that is really interesting about the concept of ecofeminism is that you have been demanding feminism, different feminisms, for over decades, and we haven't gotten there. And one thing that is interesting about putting together climate justice and feminist demands, which go perfectly well together as we have seen, is that now you have a time and you have a deadline to have feminism. You have until 2030. So I think this is really exciting for the ecofeminism, and also it puts pressure on the youth movement, and I think it's a good pressure.
I would add something about the potential for creating bridges of solidarity that comes from an ecofeminist approach, because when you're sometimes thinking about traditional approaches to labor, they are very focused on this kind of so-called productive labor sectors, but they stay a bit atomized, because you have the fights that, for example, transportation workers are going through, and the struggles that fossil fuel workers are going through, and that service workers are going through, and they're all closed on each other's struggles. But when you add this approach of ecofeminism, you realize that all of these sectors contain people who are doing also reproductive labor. They contain people who maybe are also working part-time on an informal economy, contain people that are also maybe activists, for example, and fighting in their communities against extractivism, and fighting against the climate crisis also. And so this creates a common link between all of these sectors that transcends this idea of this of normal labor, and that unites them and creates the potential for a mobilization across every kind of sector of work, and towards a common goal. And when you are thinking about the climate justice movement, you really need this kind of union and this kind of potential to create strong alliances across sectors and across communities, and this potential for, like, healthcare workers being, for example, mobilizing in solidarity with mothers, or with fossil fuel sector workers, and all of that. And I think that idea is very important, and is something that can be deepened with this ecofeminist approach.
So we have 2 minutes, but I'm going to really quickly ask a question related to internationalism and an ecofeminist internationalism. And for some context, for ecofeminists, the links between the subordination of women and the environment are rooted in what we sometimes call the capitalist patriarchy, which we know is racial and colonial. That's a global economic system embedded with the long history of gender oppression and exploitation, racial exploitation, class exploitation, sexual exploitation. Leading ecofeminist scholars and activists Vandana Shiva and Maria Mais, they describe the capitalist patriarchy as a world structure in the north that dominates the south, and men dominate women through a profit-driven global economy, which today, 20 years on, we can nuance the term men in these binary categories, but just to build on some of the foundational ecofeminist work. If there is this global capitalist patriarchy, and we know as women from different positionalities and backgrounds that we're all disproportionately impacted, but very, very differently, how do we approach a internationalist ecofeminism, knowing that we have these complicated histories?
Yeah, for me, I don't believe that there needs to be something like global, because usually global means something from the north and then implant in the south. I think that we need to have alliance. We need to have like this networking. But we need to take in consideration that there are so many realities. Even if within one country, I cannot imagine like the whole world. So we cannot expect like something we are created here in the global north to be followed by the global south. So maybe we can have a lot of encounters. We need to learn about each other. We need to like have this common theory, but leave spaces for everyone to, I don't know, to go wherever they want with the tool they have.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that there is a problem in thinking that there's a globalist solution to all the problems, and that we can approach with the model of one size fits all. But I think that at the same time we truly need internationalism, because capitalism organizes internationally, and we must struggle and fight also internationally, and build build networks, build tools, build relationships of trust and political propositions that take all these experiences and all these maybe it's because we have so many different contexts that we need to create stronger alliances, because we can have a broader view of society, and we have a better chance of envisioning a post-capitalist world, and a world that exists after and that is able to confront the climate crisis and create new realities and new possibilities.
That's a great... Do you want to add one final thing?
Yeah, I just want to add that when we're talking about creating an ecofeminism internationalism, it's not just talking about the ones that has the ecofeminism as a mark, as a way to say it. It's talking about all the communities that are doing what we consider or what we acknowledge to be ecofeminism on their own terms and in their own expressions. This means talking about communitarian feminism. It means talking about feminism that happens in the rural areas. It's being difficult to be all the time speaking in English, so I hope the listeners will appreciate that.
Yes, we do.
And the idea of that feminism and all the kinds of women organizations and the subaltern organizations can be doing ecofeminism politics, can be in ecofeminism internationalism, and I think it's really valuable to be able to understand that ecofeminism could be a category that works for us here in the global north, but maybe it will has another name, another structure, and another way of creating alliances, creating program, and improving our lives in other coordinates.
That is an amazing place to stop. I'd like to thank all of you and the amazing work you're doing. I think we can maybe conclude today that we're coming out strong, visioning an eco-socialist, eco-feminist internationalism, and thank you again for taking the time.